Hello Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean and the world, and welcome to this 1-year anniversary episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell, Donawa, attorney at law. I am so excited. It's been a whole year that Strictly Legal has been on this premier channel, the only channel that actually streams in proper HD. But I'm not going to toot my horn, but it is a fact, right? And of course, in law, we deal with facts. Right, so I don't have any champagne glasses today, but I hope at some point I will get something on set so that we can celebrate together and we can toast to 1 year of law, of legal learning, and of course imparting the law and you. Right, so let's get right into it. Now this episode, again, it's a special episode and it's all about reviewing the past year of Strictly Legal. And the first episode would have first premiered on the 21st of January 2021. And it was a very special episode because of the fact that that month was about domestic violence. And I thought, you know what, in order to start this Strictly Legal, it was important to actually impart or to invite persons to deal with this topic or this sensitive topic. We spoke about gender-based violence and its remedies with my two special guests, Mrs. Candice Barath Nahus, attorney at law, and ASP Claire Guy Allen, who is the head of the gender-based violence unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Now, Mrs. Nahus has been a victim of domestic violence. And what was so profound about this is that she gave her account of exactly what happened. Take a look.
It's a funny situation where, I mean, I'm sure that each person is different. But at the particular time that it happened to me, because it was a relationship that was about 1.5 years long, and there was a lot of emotional and mental abuse before it became physical. So it may have been about a year of constant taunting, threats, cursing, that sort of thing. And at the point that it became physical, I think for me personally, I really couldn't come to terms with what was happening. So in a way, there was a disconnect for me. And almost nobody in my life knew what was happening. And there was something that you're just going through the motions day by day, and you know what you should do. There's a logical part of you that says, okay, what would you tell, for example, a sister that was going through something like that, or a best friend, or anybody. But then when it's actually happening to you, it's a strange thing where sometimes you can't really come to terms with it, or you sometimes are in denial.
Now, she then walked us through the law relating to gender-based violence, and more particularly the domestic violence amendment legislation.
The 2020 amendment brought much-needed reform in terms of domestic violence. The previous act, the 1999 Act,
yes.
It was very narrow in its definitions, for example. So I know Ms. Allen just touched on what is domestic violence and the different acts that would fall into the category of gender-based violence. And one of the things that the amendment sought to do is expand the categories of what is domestic violence. And even, for example, emotional abuse and psychological abuse. And therefore, previously, when you would have gone to court, under the 99 Act, you would have had to fall within those very narrow definitions of what abuse was.
And it has to be a relation. There must be a relation to the individual.
So that was also another change, a fundamental change by the amendment, in that it widened greatly the categories of persons or the ambit for applicants. So therefore, before it was a very narrow definition as to who can be an applicant.
And now can you tell us who can now be an applicant?
Of course.
Yeah.
So it's basically anybody within a domestic relationship. And that now includes not just a spouse or ex-spouse, persons in a visiting relationship. Previously, you had to prove that was for a period exceeding 12 months. Now, there's no such, that isn't qualified. It now includes persons like father, mother, brother, sister, in-laws, grandparents, nephew, niece, those persons.
Friends, so if, included or gender.
Yeah.
And then we had ASP Guy Allen speaking about the police service and how can the police service assist in the fight against domestic violence.
Far too often, you're going to hear neighbors, after a death occurs, you're going to hear neighbors saying, I used to hear so-and-so, or I used to. I'm pleading to the public, please, if you see something, say something. We have had instances where public, including the family member or friend, who would make a report on behalf of a survivor. And when when we go to the survivor may downplay the abuse.
Yes.
Downplay the abuse. That's okay. We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
Now, I must thank those two ladies for joining me on set, because that was, again, the first ever episode. I mean, it was nerve-wracking. Of course, from then to now, I am sure we have grown 41 episodes. Well, actually, this is the 42nd episode later, and Strictly Legal is still here with a number of guests. So what I will do, we are going to go through episode 3, which was aired on the 4th of February 2021. And this dealt with wills. Now, a lot of persons think that preparing a will is taboo. It was important that I invited my colleague, Ms. Marissa Bob, attorney at law, to speak about that importance. Now, one of the important questions I asked Ms. Bob, why are a lot of persons afraid to prepare a will? And hear what she had to say. So we're speaking about wills.
Yes.
And of course, as an attorney, a lot of persons are often afraid to prepare a will.
Well, I think that's because people don't like to contemplate their death.
Yes.
Particularly men, I found in my practice, seem to think that they will live forever, or on the contrary, they think, I'm going to die sometime. Whatever happens after I die is whoever survives me's business.
The question on many persons' lips, what criteria is required to prepare a will? Watch this.
It's very simple, despite the hesitation that people feel or the reluctance that people feel. A will, as I said, is a physical document. There are certain characteristics of a will for validity, for legal purposes. So under Section 42 of the Wills and Probate Act, a will must be written, obviously. It must be signed at the foot of the will by the testator. And what do we mean by the foot of the will? At the bottom of the will, the testator, which is the person making the will,
Yes,
must affix their signature. And in addition, it must be witnessed by 2 adults who are able to attest that that is the signature of the person that made the will.
And these two, now as Ms. Bob would have stated in her interview, it's important to seek legal advice before preparing a will. Of course, you can prepare a will by yourself, but there are certain elements that are needed to ensure that the will is valid. So contact your attorney, any attorney that you wish to consult, and make sure that that will is made before it's too late. Now, early in the season, Strictly Legal was fortunate to have a special edition with a special guest. And this was the Honorable Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi. And this was a very, very, very interesting episode in which Mr. Al-Rawi spoke about matters of the state, matters relating to law, relating to legislation, and very, very hot topics. And one notable piece of information that he would have provided during that time was the use of pepper spray, the pepper spray legislation. And hear what he had to say about this.
What pepper spray legislation will involve is an amendment to the Firearms Act. Because pepper spray is a noxious substance. A noxious substance is a prohibited weapon. A prohibited weapon is therefore a firearm. You'll need a permit for pepper spray, but it doesn't start and stop with just the Firearms Act. It's not that simple. You want to criminalize people that use pepper spray in the commission of an offense. You can't just simply say any and everybody could get a permit for pepper spray. What about if you're on a rape charge with robbery and violence and kidnapping or trafficking in children? Surely you don't want any and everybody to have access to this.
As you would have heard, the Honorable Attorney General stated that the amendment to the Firearms Act for the use of pepper spray would have entered Parliament for the purpose of passing. And this is an update. The amendment was indeed passed, and it was assented to by Her Excellency Paula May Weeks on the 6th of July 2021, making the use of pepper spray legal. Now, it's important to note that you must obtain a license before handling pepper spray. So we don't want you guys to go out there and just start spraying people because they get you upset. No. You need to obtain a license from the TTPS. If not, you'll be arrested, you'll be charged, and you'll be brought before the law. Now, this next episode, episode 7, is very dear to me because I look up to this particular attorney, or rather barrister and attorney at law, none other than Queen's Counsel Anand Biharilal of Bedford Chambers in the UK. Now, Mr. Biharilal would have joined me via the web, and it was an amazing episode, I must say, because he dealt with how the Privy Council work, why is it important, and all these various things that deals with the argument to keep the Privy Council. Now, he has been accustomed to public law, both in the United Kingdom as well as Trinidad and Tobago. And he has won numerous cases that dealt with constitutional violation. And it was very important that Mr. Biharilal, who as well, he attended my alma mater, St. Benedict's College, so I must shout out the Laramie Lions for being on set and speaking about this particular, the highest court of our Commonwealth jurisdiction in Trinidad and Tobago, which is the Privy Council. And it's important as well to understand that we also have the highest court, which is the Caribbean Court of Justice. Unfortunately, Trinidad is not signed on fully to that particular appellant's court. But note well that this year I will be bringing a guest to speak about the Caribbean Court of Justice and the pros relating to that. So thank you so much, QC Anand Biharilal. Now, Strictly Legal is not only about imparting knowledge of the law and speaking about the law, etc. But what we thought is that it's important to celebrate persons, notable persons in the profession. And in these two episodes, we celebrated women as part of the International Women's Day and Month. And two women, special women that we celebrated. One, I had the distinct honor of interviewing this titan of a family law practitioner, Mrs. Lynette Seabrand Sweet. She would have given a history of her life as an attorney, what she would have been involved in. She was the chairman of the Equal Opportunities Commission. She was involved in practitioners, drafting practitioners' texts and legislation, particularly when it comes to family law. I don't think even when I was in law school, I would never want to go up against Lynette Seabrand Sweet. I don't think any junior attorney would have ever wanted to do that because you will get a licking in court, literally, a verbal licking. Right? And my colleagues could attest to that. And I'm always grateful to her because as much as she may come across a bit stern in court, she is such a darling. And thank you so much, Mrs. Sweet, for agreeing to come on Strictly Legal. And we will be getting back to you again. I know I promised you that. The second woman in leadership that we would have featured was Mrs. Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal, who is a senator and is the Minister in the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. And Mrs. Sagram Singh Suklal spoke about her life in private practice and that transition from private into public life. And of course, we know that it is not an easy task, particularly as a mother, a wife, as well as a woman. And it was very noteworthy that she spoke sincerely about how she feels and what she wants for the future. So thank you to both women. You have made Strictly Legal a very, very, very great brand. Thank you. Now, this episode, which was aired in April 2021, Transitioning to Law, Insight into the Journey, it was a very special one because I had the opportunity to interview my childhood friend who has grown tremendously, Corinne Prokop. She is a chartered accountant, and at the time when she came onto this episode, she was pursuing her legal education certificate. Now, one will wonder, why would you leave your lucrative job as a chartered accountant to now transition into law, leaving a job now being broken, as the local saying the local persons will say? Now, here's her story.
So I would have worked at Nilamasi Energy, which is in San Fernando, for about 4 or 5 years. Then I moved on to BG at the point in time, well, it's now Shell. So I moved on to BG and I was also an accountant there.
And you were there for a number of years?
Yes, so I was there for 4 years as well. The organization would have done some restructuring and I would have been impacted at that point in time. And well, I decided I wanted to make the switch from energy, because I would have done energy jobs before, to financial services. Because I tell people at the point in time I was not an energy professional, right. I was a financial professional. I was an accountant, so I felt as though I can transfer my skills from energy to financial services, and luckily I did. And I moved to Citibank, which is a multinational financial institution in the country. And I spent 4 years there as well. And it was at Citibank is where I decided that I wanted to do law. And it wasn't because like I just woke up one morning and decided I wanted to do law.
Well, I thought so at one point.
No, I actually wanted to do law since CXC time.
Right.
But I would have only done business subjects.
Right.
Then A-level came and same thing. I was doing, of course, the transition from CXC to A-levels, you will do business. I did business subjects as well, which would have been economics and accounting and stuff.
Like nothing to do with reading.
Exactly.
A plethora of books and stuff like that.
Exactly. So at that point in time, what I was exposed to was that you would have had to do history and literature and those sort of subjects in order to do law. So I put that idea behind my back, like, you know what, maybe I will never be able to pursue law because my background is business.
And that's a myth, eh?
Yeah, but I realize now that it's really a myth.
Yeah.
And you know, if I had the knowledge or the information back then, I probably would have pursued law immediately.
And guess what? Corinne has now been called to the bar of Trinidad and Tobago as an attorney at law, having successfully completed her legal education certificate. And there are some shots with her posing with her beautiful daughter Paige at the Hall of Justice steps after she was called to the bar virtually, of course, because it's no longer physical, right? It's no longer physical attendance. It's now virtual. So you go behind a screen and you say your oath in terms of being called to the bar of Trinidad and Tobago. I hope at some point in time, I mean after this pandemic, whenever that will be, because the way Trinidadians are going, will we ever get out of it? But nonetheless, I hope sometime that persons will be able to get back to some sort of normalcy where they can be now petitioned to that bar in the convocation hall of the Hall of Justice. You know, it's always a good feeling when you walk before the judges, the Chief Justice, and you walk outside of the Hall of Justice with your robe and you're taking photos, etc., with your colleagues and all these persons who are proud, your family, etc. And, I mean, let's see how it goes. I guess this is a virtual atmosphere now. So, nonetheless, congrats, Corinne. We are all proud of you. On the next episode, I'm about to review Parliament and the lawmaking process. Now, I was privileged enough to have on my set Ms. Chantel Laroche, Senior Legal Officer from the Office of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, who came on board to speak about just what it is, Parliament and the lawmaking process, going through the procedure in which bills now become law, what is the Senate, what is the House of Representatives, what is known as the bicameral system, etc. And many persons downplay the importance of Parliament. And it was indeed an insightful episode where Ms. Laroche took us through step by step on how a bill becomes law and, as I said, functions of Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. So thank you so much, Ms. Laroche, and thank you to the Office of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago for allowing her to come on set. And of course, you can look over our episodes on WESNCC.com as well as our YouTube channel, because these episodes are lifetime. Yeah? It's not time sensitive, right? You can reference it. You can reference WESN. You can't reference it possibly as a citation in your legal exam, but it's good for research purposes, and that is what we are about. Stay tuned, and after the break, we will continue with more review of our one-year anniversary of Strictly Legal.
The Soca Warriors are back. Trinidad and Tobago's senior men's team faces off against Bolivia in a friendly match on January 21st. Catch the ball-by-ball action on WESN Content Capital with live commentary from the Estadio Olímpico Patrio in Sucre at 5 p.m. local time. Tune in to WESN Content Capital on January 21st for this live action-packed match. Sponsored by NLCB, Carib, KFC, and the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited.
7 is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
And welcome back to this one-year anniversary celebration and review of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am Rondell, Donawa, attorney at law, and once again I'm happy that I am here 1 year later giving the law and you. Now, as I said, this is a review. So we had the second special edition of Strictly Legal, and I had the distinct honor once again to have on set the Honorable Stuart Young, Minister of Energy and Energy Industries and Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister. Now, I remember asking Mr. Young, why do they call you Minister of Everything? And what did he say?
Well, Rondell, as you know, as you've listed there, since coming into government in 2015, the Honourable Prime Minister has put me in a number of ministerial portfolio roles. One that has stuck since March 2016 is Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister. I think it was in Point 14, the Prime Minister had said, look, if you call in Minister Young Minister of Everything, that's a badge of honor. And I wear it as a badge of honor. My role, as I see it, is I've come into this thing to serve Trinidad and Tobago in whatever capacity, wherever the Prime Minister assigns me, and I will do the best for my country.
So you got your answer, right? The Minister of Everything. Now, jokingly, I mean, I know this was a very, very serious discussion, right? It was an overview of Trinidad and Tobago. But jokingly, I asked Minister Young this. Stuart Young, where do you see Stuart Young in 2025?
Well, I can't tell you where I see Stuart Young tomorrow, much less in 2025.
But of course, we have to plan. And one thing that we lack, or it's important, is succession.
Mm-hmm. Succession of?
Succession of anything. It's how we said succession what? But I mean, it was all well and good. So thank you so much, Honorable Stuart Young, for gracing us with your presence, because we value your contribution and we look forward to seeing you again. This guest is no stranger to WESN. I would have took her away from Talking Point, right, just to speak about legal. And this is Mrs. Karen Nunes-Teixeira. She's an attorney at law. She was a former Minister of Finance, as well as she was a former lecturer of law. She's an author. She's many, many, many things. And in this episode, we spoke about the rights of a common law spouse. And it was so important that we spoke about that particular episode. And trust me, it was probably the most viewed episode, because of the fact that there are a lot of persons living in Trinidad and Tobago common law, meaning they're not married, they shack up, and it's important to know what are your rights. And a lot of persons after the episode would have told me that, Mr. Donawa, I didn't know that I, as a common law, have certain rights, or that, I didn't know that I can apply for maintenance if we separate, or that if he dies, I can get something, or if she dies, I can get something. So it was a very important episode, and I thank Mrs. Nunes-Teixeira, although she came on for 2 other episodes dealing with estates, etc. This one was indeed important, and I am so grateful to her for this. Now, this episode I'm about to feature, it's about the importance of personal financial planning. Many people would have asked, okay, why are we speaking about financial planning on a legal show? Well, guess what? Because of COVID-19, things has been evolving, right? It's important to put your finance in order. And I went further in discussing this importance with my guest, Mr. Syed Anthony Bashk. Now, one of the questions that I would have asked him is, why is financial planning important?
Most people tend to not think about financial planning, but they normally will go along and go with the punches, as they say. But really, financial planning is critical if you want to accomplish your goals. And part of it really is establishing or identifying your goals and your objectives, and really putting a time frame to it. But in any financial plan, you must have different stages. And really, the first stage, or the base of your financial plan, is your wealth protection. And then you go on to wealth creation, and then you have wealth distribution.
And then I asked, how has the insurance industry become so important as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic?
COVID-19, in fact, would have revolutionized the insurance industry. We may have been advanced by 5 years in terms of technology. Also, from the public's perspective, they are now seeing that death is not only when you reach 90. Death could be at any point in time. It became a point where COVID-19 statistics started to become names. And that is when I think the public realized, oh, wait, this could happen to me. And insurance companies then took the lead into now having packages where no medicals might be required for a certain amount. You now have e-applications and things that could be done online. You could chat with a financial advisor via Zoom without going in person to meet. So a lot of things have been changed and revolutionized because of COVID-19.
Now, what I took away from this episode is that it is never too late to plan your life out. It's never too late to financially plan. Because at the end of the day, as we will have seen, many persons would have died recently from this COVID-19 and they did not put their house in order. It reminds me of the episode with the wills, right? As well as this is about estate planning. So it's about putting your house in order so that your beneficiaries can not suffer, basically. Now, in this episode, I was privileged enough to interview an award-winning Trinidadian Canadian trade union leader and social justice advocate based in Toronto, Canada. His name is Nicholas Marcus Thompson. Now, Nicholas Marcus Thompson has advocated in what you would have called the biggest black class action lawsuit, which would have addressed systematic discrimination of black workers in the federal government. And now, as a union leader president, Nicholas represented workers who were employed at the Canada Revenue Agency, which is the equivalent to the Trinidad's Board of Inland Revenue. Now, the reason why I interviewed him is because he is Trinidadian, and he did a very, very big thing in Canada, whereby as much as he has dual nationality, he was able to stay the course, he was able to fight for the black workers, he was able to fight for discrimination, and as a result, what happened was that the Canadian government actually put things in place to avoid systematic discrimination while this case goes on. So kudos to Nicholas Marcus Thompson, and keep up the good work, bro. Now here we go with this controversial topic that is constantly on the minds and hearts of many persons: mandatory vaccination. Now, on my episode on the 2nd of December, I had an honorable guest, my colleague, Mr. Rajiv Ricky, who went through the entire concept of what is mandatory vaccination versus what is voluntary vaccination versus how can this infringe on your constitutional rights. It's interesting to note that he spoke about vaccination in the workplace, and hear what he had to say. Most companies, yes, in Trinidad, didn't make that a requirement before the pandemic started.
At the Constitution, there are different statutes and different acts that affect the workplace and our lives generally. We have the Constitution, we have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Now, many times we throw around these rights. A person has a right to legal advice. Back in the day when we were going to police stations, that's the first thing we say. This man has a right to his lawyer. He has a right to legal advice. We have a right to due process. But certain rights can be limited.
And here is the update. Just recently, the Honorable Prime Minister announced that all public servants have to be vaccinated. I know at that time he would have spoken about the law with respect to mandatory vaccination. And I can recall that Her Honor, Deborah Thomas Felix, would have spoken at length about whether or not, or about the fact that mandatory vaccination is illegal. Now, while the government has not passed legislation, what they are doing is instituting policy to state, okay, you have a right to vaccinate, you don't have a right to vaccinate. But if you don't vaccinate, you can be for law. And if you for law, what can happen? You can lose your job. So it's very important to keep that, as this topic grows and it gets more into the public domain and into the legal domain. It's interesting to note when it comes to challenging this particular policy of the government, what is going to happen. I want to thank Rajiv Ricky for being a guest, preempting possibly what would have stated or what the Prime Minister would have announced just recently. Another live topic that we would have discussed then was the discrimination of the Hindu community with respect to the open fire cremation. Hear what Rajiv had to say.
the Hindu religion believes that I have a right to bury and burn, right, in the open cremation site. The government has taken a view that right now that is banned, and it's before the courts. It is a battle over constitutional rights. No determination has been made, and that's the funny thing about the situation we're in.
Just recently, the government has announced that they would lift that ban and they would now allow open pyre cremation. Now, let's see how this evolves, and of course, I'm sure at some point this may become a legal issue, although I note that it was becoming a legal issue or something or matter would have been filed, judicial review proceedings would have been filed in the courts. So we will stay tuned in terms of what would have transpired from that particular action. Well, we are out of time with this 1 year in review for Strictly Legal. However, I hope that you enjoyed what we had to display. Of course, it was very difficult to highlight all the episodes. We are 41 episodes strong, but with 2 editions, 39 episodes. However, I'm sure I want to thank all my guests who have appeared in person as well as via Zoom, both locally and internationally. We are indeed grateful to you for imparting that knowledge and just giving advice on the law in terms of various areas. So once again, cheers to WESN, cheers to Strictly Legal, my virtual glass, although I'm still waiting on my Pedrox. Nonetheless, it's going to come soon. However, yes, we are on set, so let's keep it neutral and let's keep it PG. Nonetheless, thank you so much. Cheers to us, cheers to WESN. So once again, be viewing next week for a brand new edition of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. And don't forget, you can catch our broadcast and our podcast at Strictly Legal with Donawa.com, as well as on WESN Content Capital social media platforms. So without much further ado, thank you so much for viewing. God bless.